get started. So first and foremost, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in this beautiful planet of ours. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on this webinar titled Anchoring the African Internet Ecosystems, Lessons from Kenya and Nigeria's IXP Growth. And before we get started, I would just like to walk you through some of the ways you can engage with us through this webinar for the next 1.5 hours or so. Howie, if you could help me take to the next set of slides, please. So for starters, we have interpretation. So if you could look at the bottom of your Zoom window, there is an option for English or French. So depending on your preference of language, you can switch to either English or French. That should work for you. Then we have a chat room. So use the chat room to engage with other attendees. I see some of you have already started. And it seems like my lockdown look is the icebreaker for today. So thank you very much for the compliments. Then if you have questions, you can post them in the Q&A. We have a Q&A room or a chat room, and that's where we'll be monitoring the questions. And so please post any questions that you have there. We have our colleague Gila, who will be keeping track of that, and will be posing those questions to the panelists. Then in addition to that, if you would like to ask questions directly to the panelist, please do so in the same Q&A room, and we will give you the opportunity to actually ask the question using voice. The team behind supporting us, Howie, will provide you with the sort of the rights or the permissions that are needed to do so. Then we also have social media links. So if you're tweeting, if you're using social media, Twitter and Facebook, those are the hashtags for this particular webinar and for the launch of the report. And finally, we will be recording this webinar so that those who are not able to attend can also get to watch this later. So with that, I hope you're all set and we are good to go. And I will be your moderator for today. So maybe I should start by introducing myself. My name's Michuki Mwangi. I work for the Internet Society. I'm the Senior Director for Internet Technology and Development, and having been involved in IXP work for here at ISOC for the last 10 years, and certainly before that as well. So the agenda for today, we will take a few minutes just to go through a bit of a background around why this work is important and where we're coming from with this particular study. And then I will invite Michael Kende to give us the report summary overview. Then we will invite 3 panelists to discuss the report because they were main contributors, and will be representing the 3 key stakeholders that are involved and evaluated or considered under this particular study. That is a representative from an IXP will be Muhammed Rudman, a representative from a CDN that will be Sylvie LaPerrière from Google, and a representative from a network operator, and the data center will be Ben Roberts from Liquid. Then we'll have some time for a Q&A, and then we will share with you the report, the full report, which will be exclusive to all of you who are attending, and then we will have some closing remarks. So with that, I think we can get started. On to the next slide. So, and the next slide. So I will start off by providing some bit of a background from an ISOC point of view. As you all know, the Internet Society has had a long history of collaborating with the community with respect to internet development. And we've mostly done a lot of that collaboration looking at capacity building or focusing on capacity building and critical infrastructure development. The work is currently right now looking at the current initiatives that we have in 2020 under what we call internet growth. And under that, we have a project called Infrastructure and Community Development, which is basically working to develop the local technical communities that are responsible for developing the key infrastructure and operating the key infrastructures in the region for the benefit of the community and a better and stronger internet. So if you could go on to the next slide, Howie. So one of the things I would like to talk about is the background of where this is coming from. We started the work and collaborating with various stakeholders around about 2008, 2009. And during that time, there were just about 16 active IXPs in Africa. There wasn't a lot of information available, and there was quite a lot of work that was needed. I do recall that it was quite a challenge to try and get network IXPs to even participate in discussions around what's happening in their country, how do we grow interconnection. And the key thing that we thought was, how do we get IXPs to get to a point where they're mature enough to exchange more traffic locally. We wanted to bridge the information asymmetry on peering and interconnection. We also realized from a survey that there was very little traffic that was actually being exchanged locally, probably less than 1%. And we wanted to see that grow to about 80% of the traffic being exchanged within the continent or at the local level, being locally accessible. And thirdly, we also wanted to have a better understanding of where those challenges are and how we could contribute to that development. So part of the work that we undertook, basically in terms of supporting the development of new internet exchange points, we also worked with various stakeholders to do capacity building. We went across the region doing many workshops, mobilizing the community, providing infrastructure support. And we also undertook the initial study looking at the impact of IXPs, which was called the Initial Assessment of the Impact of the IXPs in Kenya and Nigeria in 2012, just to give us a broad overview of what does it mean to have an internet exchange point and what kind of impact that was having. I know Michael will talk a little bit more about that as he sets to give us an overview of what things looked like in 2012 and today. But I would like to recognize that at this point in time, it was really a major vision from the colleagues that we worked with, Karen Rose and Jane Coffin, Christian O'Flaherty, among others, who really helped to put this into a perspective, because at the time we really did not have any particular study that could really demonstrate what the impact of IXPs was. And based on the work that we did at the time, I think it will be really important for us, as Harry, you could go to the next slide, to recognize that most of this work has been done through collaborators, and we'd like to take these opportunities to appreciate the support they've given us. There are just too many to fit all of them in one slide, so I've just picked a few of them. But there are really, really many organizations that we've worked with over the last decade or so. And we hope that even from the outcomes that we'll find for this report, as we reimagine or try to imagine what the future looks like, we hope we'll continue to collaborate with all these partners and others who are not captured on this slide to take us to the next level. So with that, I hope I've sort of created a broad stroke overview of where the work is coming from. This study sort of updates the 2012 report, and I would like to invite Michael Kende to give us a summary overview of what his findings were, because Michael actually was the author of the initial study in 2012, and we were fortunate enough to find him to be able to do this updated study or report. And he will be in a better position to tell us more about what his findings were. Now, I would like to take a minute to just introduce Michael. So Michael is a senior fellow and a visiting lecturer at the Graduate Institute of Geneva and a senior advisor at Analysis Mason. He's also the former chief economist at the Internet Society. And prior to joining the Internet Society, he was a partner at Analysis Mason. Michael has done a significant amount of work, as I've mentioned in the past, earlier on. He helped us with the initial study and has also done other work to support the growth and development of the internet in emerging regions across the world. So one of the things that I took note of is that he spent 5 years as a professor of economics at INSEAD. And I think that's one of the things I value about his work and working with us, is that he's able to present that economist's perspective to the impact of IXPs, which we thought was quite valuable at the first study, and really also brings out that impact as well to date. So without further ado, I would certainly like to invite Michael to present to us the overview of the study. Michael, over to you.
I'd also like to thank all the stakeholders that helped with this study. I was able, I guess without knowing that it would be the last trip for a while, but I was able to get to Kenya and Nigeria in the last week of January and interview a lot of stakeholders who also helped with some follow-ups. And that was very valuable. All of their organizations are thanked in the on the final page of the report that we'll be releasing. And in particular, I'd like to thank Muhammed and Jacob at IXPN for a very warm welcome and help in putting together all of those interviews and in the logistics. So thank you all for that. So without further ado, let's go to the next page, Howie. So kind of a statement. I think this was really reaffirmed in this study, the importance of an internet exchange point in the anchoring and helping the development of the ecosystem in a country. I think it's, probably one of the cheapest or most cost-effective ways to see radical changes, improvements in the internet ecosystem of a country. And I think that hopefully we've demonstrated that with this study that we'll be talking about now. Next slide, please. So just a little repeat of what Michuki said. In 2010, the goal was set for 80% of content to be locally accessible by 2020. And it was quickly and obviously seen that internet exchange points are the key to meeting this goal. And what these studies set about to do was to identify and quantify the benefits of that and the impact of that. So the first study was in 2012, which, as Michuki said, I worked on, looking at the benefits of 2 IXPs, one in Kenya, the KIXP, and the other in Nigeria. And it was really the first study to really quantify the economic benefit. I think everyone understood in general the benefits of an IXP. But what I think this really showed was the need to host content locally and not just focus on having the ISPs interconnecting, but also to have the content locally. And while I was at the Internet Society, we did 2 subsequent studies on the benefits and impact of local content hosting, which are kind of complementary to this particular study here. And now we'll see the benefits of that over the last 8 years in Kenya and Nigeria. Next slide, please. So looking at the benefits, I mean, the key benefits all stem from the simple observation that without an IXP, ISPs and others were using their international IP transit to exchange local traffic and to access content. And that tended to be quite expensive, and it would tend to trombone or go out of the country or region, often from Africa to Europe, be exchanged and come back following the outline of the trombone, the musical instrument. So it's often called tromboning. And so the IXP enables the local traffic to be exchanged locally with three benefits, which we looked at in the study in 2012 and then updated in this study. So if you look at the table on the right, the amount of traffic in 2012, the peak traffic in Kenya was about 1 gigabit per second through the IXP. That means traffic that would have otherwise left the country to come back and be exchanged. In Nigeria, it was slightly less at 300 megabits per second. So the savings were the first benefit. Not using quite expensive IP transit saved almost $1.5 million in Kenya and just over $1 million in Nigeria. In addition to the cost savings, there was significant reduction in latency because the traffic wasn't tromboning out of the region, out of the continent. So the latency goes down from about 200 to 600 to a level of 2 to 10 milliseconds. What I think was our real finding that we hadn't quite expected when we started this study was that this actually increased usage. So it wasn't just that it cost the ISPs less, but it increased usage, particularly for content that was hosted locally. In this case, mainly a Google cache. And it significantly increased the amount of usage because it was just faster and easier to get to, and people didn't give up. And for the ISPs and mobile operators that were selling content by the megabyte, they were seeing increased revenues in Kenya of about 6 million. In Nigeria, it was harder to measure because there was so little traffic at the time. But as we'll see in a second, that's changed quite a bit. Next slide, please. So what we've put together here is based on what we saw in the countries. We put together a rough outline of 3 stages of ecosystem development based around the amount of traffic that was localized. So if you look at the top arrow, the first transition point is at about 30% of traffic. And of course, this can vary by country, but this is clearly what we saw in the 2 countries. Going from stage 1 to stage 2 is at about 30%. And then at 70%, there might be another transition. And that takes you into stage 3 and the 80% goal. The order of how these stages are developed would be in the first stage, it's mostly local ISPs and local content that's being exchanged, although relatively little content. Then you start getting more international content, the large content delivery networks or CDNs starting to move into the countries, make content available locally, regional ISPs starting to exchange traffic to access the content. And that goes through stage 2. And then the final stage actually goes back up, as we saw, and as we'll talk about. The final stage is really getting all ISPs in the country to join, including the small ones, and to bring back a lot of the local content that may be hosted abroad, bring it back into the country, and that'll take it into 70–80% of traffic. Howie, if you just click once, please. So what we saw in Kenya and Nigeria in 2012 was each were at about 30%, just on the cusp of moving to stage 2. And then again, Howie, please. And then in this visit, 2020, each of the countries is about 70%, just on the cusp of stage 3. And we'll talk about these transitions and what needs to be done to move from one stage to the next. Next slide, please. So the key difference from stage 1 to stage 2 is having the international content locally available. In 2012, Kenya and Nigeria just had as I had said, the Google Global Cache. mainly YouTube videos, and we could see already the benefits of that in terms of increasing usage of YouTube once it was locally available and quicker to access. By 2020, each country had a cache or even a point of presence from all the international content providers. That's what took it up to 70%. And the POP in particular means that all traffic from the CDN is being exchanged, peered locally in the country. And one of the large CDNs was kind enough to give us this graph on the right, showing what happens when you put a POP in a country, first in Nigeria and then in Kenya. Within 6 months, the amount of local traffic goes from 0 to 80%. But that's not just shifting international traffic to be locally accessible. The latency fell significantly, and actually traffic grew. It's not on this graph, but monthly traffic grew 140% in Nigeria and 160% in Kenya, which shows the real benefits in terms of latency, increased usage from having these local access to the content. Next slide, please. So just to quickly go through what happened in the two countries. In Kenya, the KIXP grew, added a node in Mombasa, moved the original node out, keeping the old one, moved to ADC Nairobi. It no longer has a requirement that everyone peer with everyone, the mandatory multilateral peering agreement. And if you look at the right, you can see the cost savings went up significantly. The peak traffic went from 1 gigabit per second in 2012 to 19 in 2020, an enormous exponential growth. That's what took it from 30 to 70% of local traffic. And even though the cost of IP transit fell significantly, which is excellent and helps to promote bringing content into the country, the cost savings went up by about 4 times because there was so much more content going through the IXP, not being exchanged using the IP transit. Next one, please. Similar story in Nigeria, even more growth. The IXP N grew to 3 nodes in Lagos, and 3 new nodes across the country, also no longer the mandatory peering requirement. And there has been a requirement that a Nigerian license was needed to connect to the exchange, which really precluded regional ISPs from connecting, and that was removed, allowing for more regional traffic. I'll leave Muhammed to talk a bit more about this. He's the CEO who pushed all of these changes through, but just a note on the right, the incredible changes that took place over the last 8 years, the peak traffic going from 300 megabits per second to 125 gigabits per second. And I'll just note that it peaked much higher than that at one point during the COVID crisis with the increase in home use and for business and for education, entertainment, etc. Local traffic, as in Kenya, went up to 70%. Again, the IP transit cost fell quite a bit, but the cost savings from using the IXP rather than the international connections were at least 40 million. So up about 40 times over 2012. So incredible growth and progress there. Next slide, please. So the change factors, just to summarize, both IXPs removed their mandatory peering requirements, which provided much greater flexibility for the networks to decide who to peer with and who not to peer with. Each of them grew within and across the cities of their countries. Each has at least a node in at least one carrier-neutral data center, so that the peering networks that are using the IXP, if they choose, can also arrange private network interconnects within the data center, which is not captured in these numbers, but is certainly a benefit of the IXP, that it acts as a magnet or anchor for the peering networks, who can then choose within a data center or even across data centers to privately interconnect. So the numbers that we saw certainly understate the true benefits of the IXPs. Both countries have a new IXP as well, suggesting that there's a further level of richness in the ecosystem, that there's a niche that Asteroid and partner in Nigeria think that they can fill. The industry side, there's new cables continuously being built. The report has a table that shows all the new cables, but interesting ones include one that was just announced by Facebook and one that will be going online by Google. There are at least one carrier neutral data center that was built in each country, likely more. And as we saw, the international content providers built out to take advantage of the data centers and the IXP. Finally, the governments had open telecom markets, allowing Facebook and Google and others to land there, competition in the ISP market and others, and both passed data protection acts that will likely help to attract more content and more services, given the protection that those acts will provide. Next slide, please. There are a few market gaps that are keeping, or then when filled, will take both countries into stage 3, that is over 70% local content and towards the 80% goal. Mainly, it's local content providers are hosting their content abroad. One stakeholder in Nigeria said that it was about 3 times more costly to host content locally. But by hosting abroad, that's imposing a significant cost on the ISPs that have to bring the content into the country. So this requires more awareness of the benefits of local hosting. As I said, the Internet Society has the 2 papers that were done with case studies on Rwanda showing the benefits of local hosting. And one of the issues is clearly the cost of operating the data centers, given this relatively smaller scale and power issues. And the other gap is the smaller ISPs that don't always connect to the IXP directly. They generally purchase upstream access from larger ISPs. In Kenya, they're indirectly benefiting by buying links to all the traffic from the CDNs. So they're getting that at some discount, presumably. But they could get that themselves by directly connecting to the IXP and peering with the CDNs rather than purchasing the links. One of the issues is, again, awareness, understanding of the benefits of peering at the IXP. The cost of accessing the data center and the IXP is still likely an issue for some of the smaller ISPs. And if those ISPs are not in the cities with the nodes, the cost of capacity between cities in both countries is still relatively high. I think a bit more so, it's fair to say, in Nigeria. But that's providing a significant constraint on being able to access the nodes across the different cities. Next slide, please. So in terms of recommendations, the IXPs in both countries have followed these and provide good guidance for IXPs in other countries. Their sound governance has been critical. They've grown the IXP within and across the cities and leveraged relationships with the data centers, some of whom allow them provide free rack space and maybe even connections to the members as a way of attracting content providers, service providers to the data center, leading to private connections and the like. So that's been a very positive relationship. Increasing awareness is key among particularly the smaller ISPs and local content providers, and this is being done and can continue to be done with capacity building led by the IXPs, by ISOC and others, and that should broaden to other stakeholders in the countries that may have content that could be exchanged at the IXP. Aggregating demand by the ISPs for capacity will help to lower the cost, and likewise, smaller content providers, or more likely their developers, could begin to pool their demand to get more affordable local hosting. The governments can continue to lower the cost of deploying intercity fiber, address the cost and reliability of power at the data centers, increase adoption and usage with lower taxes and other broadband strategies, and enable innovative access models such as the community networks that the Internet Society and others are helping communities to put in place. So finally, just a quick conclusion. Next slide, Howie. Moving from stage 1 to stage 2 involved growing the IXP to different sites in different cities, attracting the CDNs and the international content, and then going from stage 2 to stage 3 is going to involve bringing content back into the country, getting the smaller ISPs to connect, and developing the infrastructure between the cities and throughout the countries. This will bring these two countries and others that follow up to the 80% goal of the Internet Society and the community around it. So with that, I'll thank you for your attention. I see that there's questions coming in, so I'll look forward to the 3 presentations and then answering your questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that brief. I think I'm very excited about this report because it suddenly shows us the potential that IXPs have in developing a local internet ecosystem, and it grows quite fast. I mean, we had huge anticipation that we'll get to 80-20 by 2020, and look where we are with Kenya and Nigeria. And so at some point we were concerned that we might not hit it. We thought we were just being too ambitious, saying 80-20 by 2020. And for those who don't know, the background here was that we copied the whole UN. They had the UN had these Millennium Development Goals, and we said, why don't we come up with something big just like they do? It doesn't need to be scientific, it just needs to be big enough and ambitious enough. And so I know one time someone said to me, I don't think this will be possible, but here we are, 70-30. That's just incredibly amazing. So Muhammed, there are a couple of things which came out there, and I would like to give you that opportunity to talk about what really happened in Nigeria. How were you able to actualize this growth? And just before you take the floor, I'd like to take an opportunity to let you know who Muhammed is. First, he's a good friend of mine and a good friend of the community as well. He's been involved. He's actually the first CEO of Internet Exchange Points of Nigeria, and it's the first neutral IXP there. He's been in the industry for more than 19 years, and he's really served the community in various ways. He's on the board and is actually on the chairman of the Nigeria IPv6 Council. He's also on the board of the Nigerian CCTLD Association, and also contributes really to the development of internet in Nigeria in various ways, and more so also supporting the community in West Africa from the IXP development point of view, working with and collaborating with IXPs in that region. So with that, Muhammed, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Michuki, for the introductions. Quite appreciated. I want to thank, I think, ISOC. Without them, we couldn't have achieved this, for all the support, especially in the initial studies and updating this report 8 years after. So it will show the significant impact of the ISPs. Is quite apt. I think it's an important milestone, especially in 2020, to do this study. I also want to thank Michael Kende, my friend here, for coming to Nigeria to take his time to talk to us and to talk to all our members, the data centers and other stakeholders within Nigeria for the studies. I think what I should just focus on is really what attributed us to this growth. In terms of savings, as Michael said, from $1 million in 2010 to right now, at least over $40 million in 2020 within the span of 8 years. Well, the reality is all due to content providers. because most of the Nigerian networks, especially the big telcos and the ISPs, are all eyeball networks, you know, and the coming of content providers into Nigeria, as Michael has also indicated, really made a huge impact, you know, for the growth of the local traffic. So as they rightly said, content is king, and this has really helped towards the development of the internet exchange point in Nigeria. Another aspect is that we have seen the emergence of new data centers that are coming into Nigeria. You know, some are globally certified, some are, you know, mid-sized data centers that have come over the years. And because of these data centers, we've seen also more content providers coming into the country. We have seen smaller companies that are into hosting, especially the registrars of the .ngcctld, coming together, you know, to host their content, the websites of .ng locally. So we've seen a lot of content coming back into the country, but right now that content is not really huge, considering that the .ngcctld has over 150,000 registered domains. We have maybe 10 to 15% of that are hosted locally. So mostly the growth is due to content and asset and data centers. Then at IXPN over the years, as Michael have said, also we have added additional POPs in the last 8 years. We have added 2 to cover 2 additional geopolitical zones in Nigeria. And what we have seen is that you know, more smaller service providers are evolving to connect to those different POPs. We've also had interconnection between our POPs. When the first survey was done, all our IXPs are operating in silos. None of them are interconnected. But when he came back in 2020, we saw that, what is it called? There is fiber connection right now between all the various POPs that we have across Nigeria. I think it's also important to maybe mention that IXPN, you know, won the West African regional IX bid. You know, there was a bid in 2005 by African Union Commission to provide funding to support exchange points to become regional exchange points. And IXPN won that of West Africa. The funds that came in actually helped us in building better infrastructure. We upgraded our entire core network, you know, through that funds. For example, we have a site in Kano that is co-located within a government facility. It's actually the Kano State Library, and power has been a major challenge because there were no co-location facilities in Kano. We had to, you know, co-locate within a public facility. And because of the funds we received from the African Union, we provided solar panels and battery bank so that we can run the services at you know, very reasonable cost, so that we can allow smaller service providers within that region to interconnect at a very small amount of money. I don't know how much time I have, but let me not take too much time. Possibly we have other participants that are here that would like to ask questions. But once again, thank you so much, Michuki and the ISOC team for the study and for creating this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Muhammed. And that's really useful background to what's happening in Nigeria. So next, I would like to invite someone who's been mentioned in terms of the category of contributors to that potential growth. This is the CDN. So I'd like to invite Sylvie LaPerrière, who is a builder of the global internet. She's an interconnection strategist for Google Peering, Caching, and Cloud. And to talk to us about what her perception is with respect to the growth that she has seen from a CDN perspective in both Kenya and Nigeria. Sylvie.
Good day, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on the webinar. I first would like to thank ISOC for organizing this webinar, but more importantly, for commissioning the study. Sorry. It's always important to measure the progress that we've made, especially when we have set such ambitious goals. And on the goals, I would like to call out, Michuki, that big goals attract big results. So I would encourage that we continue doing so. Audacity is what changes our mindset. So in terms of participation in the IXPs, for a CDN, it's very important to have a very healthy network of IXPs. What do we mean by healthy IXPs? Well, very much like this study has showed, it starts with a very good governance. So good governance means that the members that join the IXPs get services that they want at the cost that they can afford, and they engage in this ecosystem. So the underlying value of IXPs is, like you, the 160 odd participants on this call, it's creating a community and it's creating an engagement and a network effect at each IXPs. For a CDN like Google, there is obviously very key benefits to joining an IXPs. The first one being reducing latency to customers, improving their experience. No one likes to have 200, 600 milliseconds when they want some content. So serving the content locally improves the experience for all users, and that's what we're about. The first step for us is to install what we call a GGC, a Google Global Cache. We will install this into an IXP to promote local content inside the IXP. So we'll serve locally, and then we'll grow this base. And eventually, and I was asked also to call out what is on the GGC. On the GGC is basically static content. So think of YouTube videos or Google Maps. It's content that doesn't move or is not dynamic. So that's what we can cache. And after deploying a successful GGC, what we will do is bring the rest of Google, so the network 15169, and we will peer directly at the IXP. That is what provides the entire subset of routes for Google and all the services. Yes. So what I would like to have all of us do is, I think we're very close to the 80%, and 2020 is not finished. We still have 6 months to do, and I think COVID has been actually a benefit to all network operators. Without the internet, it would have been far worse. So it's a good test and a good show of the resilience of all the networks that you have built, of all the content that you are serving for the benefit of the users. Think that without your contribution, this pandemic would have been far worse for many of us. So on that, I will leave the room for the next panelist, and I can take questions at the end.
Thank you, Sylvie. Much appreciated. So next on, I would like to invite Ben Roberts. Ben is the Group Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at Liquid. And we've worked very closely with Liquid Telecom over the years. And Ben has been one of the key champions, if I would say, in promoting interconnection and traffic exchange in Africa. One of my most favorite items that or points I recall about Ben is that he really liked to champion the Cape to Cairo approach through terrestrial capacity. And he's been key in getting Liquid to deliver that vision from Cape to Cairo through dry packets, as we call them, instead of wet packets. So the floor is yours, Ben, to talk to us about your experience with respect to peering in Africa, and also by the fact that you're peering at both exchange points. What has been your experience with respect to this growth, and how do you see that looking for going forward?
You can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I'm on one device for video and another device for audio. So yeah, thanks, Michuki. Maybe I'll just turn this one on and see if that works. So first of all, let me start by talking about where I stand with peering. I'm at Liquid Telecom. We are both a data center operator, and I started our data center business when he came to Kenya, actually, and we bought a data center here. And we also, as a network operator, I also wear another hat, and I'm a member of the management committee of the Johannesburg Internet Exchange, or the Internet Exchanges in South Africa, which includes Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban. And they are at what we would call stage 3, according to the report. So we're now, as Liquid Telecom, we're able to get about 80% of our traffic from our South African internet exchange points. But for Kenya, it's around 70%. We're quite new to Nigeria exchange point, and we came there when we bought a CDN network that we bought from another African provider. So so I've been peering as Liquid Telecom since around about 2003. We connected to the internet as Liquid Telecom in 2002, and we started peering first in London, and then from about 2003 we started peering in Zimbabwe in the first it was the first internet exchange we peered at. Now I live in Kenya now, but I used to live in UK. And let me start by saying that I first met Michuki in London at around about 2004, 2005. And he came to a London Internet Exchange meeting, and we got talking there about Interconnection Africa. I was working for this little old African startup company. And we've been working together as ISOC for a long period after that. But when I came to Kenya, where I live now, Michuki was the first person I called. He was my first friend in the country. So, now he looks like that. I'd now call him my oldest friend in the country, the way he's looking right now. But definitely he's my first friend. So, when I came to buy companies here, we called him up and I went for a cup of coffee to find out what was going on. So why do I bring that up? The same experience really, for me, having built our internet networks has followed in many other countries. And as I said, we first peered in Zimbabwe. When I first started traveling to Zimbabwe, I went there to launch new products, satellite products, and then fiber in Zimbabwe. I already had a pretty well-established base of people I knew really well in the internet industry and friends. We bought one of those companies as Liquid Telecom. We acquired them. Another company, the others became our customers. So by the process of peering, I was sitting in London, but I was making all these contacts in Africa. And there are other people I see people who are on this webinar who, I've only met some of them in the last few years, but we've been exchanging, interactions over the years on mailing lists and peering, things like that. So where do we benefit? We benefit as a data center operator. We benefit quite well. It is very important if you're a data center operator and you want to be successful and fill your spaces. It's very important that you create communities of interest. Now, that is to say, if you want to have all of the internet service providers in your data center all buying your space, then it's very good to host an internet exchange point. So what we call internet exchange points, we call them golden customers. So that is why we've been very supportive of internet exchange points as golden customers. And we've even given them golden special deals to come into our data centers, because they bring in the ISPs, and then other clients all require the ISPs to be in the data center. So they bring it all together. So really, as a data center operator, it's very important to have them. We did buy recently a data center in South Africa, and we actually put our first POP in South Africa. We put into that data center. It was the Neotel data center back then, and we put our first POP in there, but we were unable to peer there. It cost us quite a lot of money to get to the internet exchange points that were there. It was costing us around $30 a megabits per second to get from the data center where we hosted to the data center where the IXP was hosted. And I did push very hard all along, even as a ManCom member of the IXPs in South Africa, to get them to expand into other data centers and add that. But literally, I had to buy the company, and we bought the company in South Africa and bought that data center to make it happen that we connected there. But it's been very beneficial now to have the Johannesburg Internet Exchange, the Cape Town Internet Exchange into our data center, and it's helped us bring some very big global clients into those data centers who we are hosting now, because they require to have that connectivity and connectivity between the different sites and different exchange points there. Let me comment then as an operator. Michael's covered it very well. The benefits to an operator are very strong. The reducing of latency, making experience better for your customers. The reduction in costs and those savings. So he's talked about that quite a lot. I won't add any more. But perhaps an intrinsic benefit of peering and being part of these exchange points for us, as I say, we started out as a little old African company based out of London, but now we are in the top 50 in the world of global IP networks. And as Sylvie pointed out, the first thing that a company like Google does is install a Google Global Cache. That was our first conversations with some of these big global companies. It was certainly our first conversation with Google, with other companies, was around peering and caching. That was the first interaction we had with these companies. And these companies are now some of our biggest customers. We have very large partnerships. We're investing in things together and doing initiatives, and we're hosting landing stations for balloons and all these other things that are going on. So the very act of peering and becoming part of this community has introduced us as Liquid Telecom to a whole host of ISPs and people who became our customers, and it's also introduced us into forming long-term partnerships with some of these largest global internet companies now, who we are doing significant amounts of business with. So I think, those for me are the undocumented intrinsic benefits of peering. Forums like AFPIF, which we've been very active in over the course of time, have been places that we've come together to facilitate conversations around where we're going to peer and who we're going to peer with, and that really has been part of growing together in the community. So I think I'll end my presentation there, and I'm looking forward to answering some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. And I think that brings us to the end of the overview on the report and the contributions from the various key stakeholders who are also interviewed as part of the report as well. And now, with that, I would like to go into the Q&A. I will invite my colleague Gila to help me with this. And also, if you want to raise your question verbally, I will ask you to raise your hand, and my colleagues will see you and give you the floor. So Gila, you've been monitoring the room. Where are we with Q&As?
We have a couple of questions. The first one is coming from Bruno Vianney. And the question is, do you know of any experience in East Africa where small ISP were preventing from participation as peers in the IXP? Are IXPs in East Africa required to have a license and or access regulated? I think this Ben Roberts had already answered, but if there is any other answer, we can take that one.
I mean, maybe I can actually add to the answer, but yeah, obviously it was covered in the report that you do need a license to operate an IXP, but the point of view about the small ISPs, they're certainly not prevented from joining the Internet Exchange Point in Kenya. But when you are a small ISP, you might find that the cost of access to get to the ISP can be a bit expensive. So I talked about our own experience when we set up a first pop in South Africa. It was costing us $30 a megabits per second to get there to the IXP, which is in another place across the other side of Johannesburg. If you're a small ISP in Kenya, you might be serving a community network. You might have 5,000 customers in Eastleigh or something like that, or even in Kisumu or something. It might be quite expensive for you to get to an ISP. So that could be the preventative cost rather than necessarily the joining cost.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
So so the next question is from Oluni Ajao. He's asking, is there any initiative to support smaller local players? I am with a web host present on 3 exchange points across Africa. We would like to join more, but the cost of memberships and ports are not feasible for our current scale. And so his question is about price and membership costs associated.
Okay, Michuki, can I take that question?
Yes, go ahead, Muhammed.
Okay. One is that in Nigeria here, we encourage, especially such companies, we do give waivers as high as 1 year, free port for such hosting companies that are coming into Nigeria. And usually what we do, we give higher ports. For example, if someone wants a gig port, we charge for 100 Mbps port just to encourage. We also collaborate with our data center operators where we are to see where they can benefit from a waiver for the cross-connect fees. And to be honest with you, for all the smaller operators that are connected, some of them that have not even paid for up to 2 years, we have never disconnected one of them. And we usually even renegotiate and find a way to waive the burden of debt that is on them. So I know Mr. Ajao is my good friend. If you have any issues in IXPN, please let me know so that we can support you. But we are here to serve you. I hope I've answered the question. Yes.
Okay, the next question is from Abdel Salam Kabaj. He's asking, how can ISPs and IXP deal together? Some are losing business and others are having more business. So probably someone can put in context ISP and IXP, how they deal together, and if the IXP is not taking business of an ISP. That's the question.
Honestly, the question is not clear. And what we always do is we don't compete, but rather we collaborate because they are our members. So his question is not really clear. If maybe he will restate it so that we can answer him.
It's more about competition. So probably you can clarify how they don't compete, how an IXP don't compete with an ISP, and probably that will answer his question.
Okay, an ISP is an internet service provider that reach out directly to the end users. And while an IXP operator usually interconnect networks together for local exchange of traffic. So in reality, there is no way an ISP with an IXP can compete together. So that's why, but in terms of collaboration, yes, they can find a way to collaborate, especially in remote regions where IXPs are setting up new POPs to see how they can collaborate in terms of sharing the cost for co-location, maybe in terms of coming up with the right pricing for the ports of the exchange point. I see areas of collaboration, but certainly not competition.
Okay. I think the subsequent question as well is with the West Africa exchange point. I think you mentioned that in your in your intervention. Still, Ajao is asking that the project to interconnect Ghana Exchange and Nigeria Exchange has been stopped for 2 years. And he's asking, is there any chance this will be restored in the future?
Yes, excellent question. We did that as an experiment to interconnect between Nigeria and Ghana to see the amount of traffic that is available out there. And based on my discussions with the Ghanaian IXP, what we agreed upon is, to see how we can collaborate to pay for the fiber capacity that will link up the two exchange points. And especially when we got the two exchanges connected, we realized that the Ghanaians are the ones coming to Nigeria. 80% of the traffic, they are the ones reaching out to Nigeria. So to some extent, they were supposed to be the ones to pay for the cycle because they are the ones that are doing more of the download. And unfortunately, there were some incidences where the person in charge of the exchange, I think, left the exchange, and we couldn't really collaborate. And what I noticed is not only Ghana and other West African countries, when I discuss with them towards collaborating to see how we can link up the various exchanges, is that almost the few West African countries, Abidjan, Ghana, and the rest feels like they also want to be the regional hub. Why should they promote, Nigeria? Or because if they know that if they go connected to Nigeria, because of our huge population and because of our huge content, possibly they will be the ones, to take the capacity from us. So most of them feel threatened, but in reality, I see that it's important for us to collaborate. Is after we have done that, another exchange point in Nigeria evolved. It's called the West African IX WAFIX, launched by Mwangi. The idea, I think, with them also was to provide this regional interconnection, but unfortunately, up to now, it has not taken place. So we are open if you have any ideas on how we can make it a reality, because it's just collaboration. If we can make it happen, let's make it happen. But initially, as I told you, one of the challenges is the management of the exchange point in Ghana. Two was the high cost of the transmission capacity between Nigeria and Ghana. What we are getting at that time, the prices were around $40, while the prices of transit were less than $30. So it doesn't make any business justification for an ISP in Ghana to connect to Nigeria to download traffic. But over the last few years, we have seen that cost has significantly dropped. Possibly it will be a good time now to open up that conversation.
Okay. I might add to that. I think, what you're talking about is a disparity in who gets the benefit of a certain service, and when it comes to cost sharing. And in IXPs, generally the larger operators on the IXPs will pay higher port fees. They'll be buying a 10 meg port or a 100 gig port or a 10 gig port. So they'll be paying higher port fees than a small ISP. And when it comes to country operations, the larger operators are already going to have their own country-to-country network. So in Europe, we have a backbone that goes from Paris to Frankfurt to London to Marseille. And we have a similar thing in Africa. The problem then arises that the larger operators don't necessarily want to pay higher port fees to subsidize smaller operators because it's something they're already buying. So it's probably unlikely to become sustainable because it requires everybody sharing a cost, and some people have already invested in that cost. Some have already, a company like Google, we're hearing, have already building a subsea cable. They've already made investments. A company like Liquid Telecom, we would have taken leases on subsea cables. So with larger members not necessarily wanting to fund and subsidize smaller members who might be benefiting the most, or the only ones benefiting, is unlikely to be sustainable.
Thank you. A question to Muhammed. This one is from Muhammed. He says, thank you for your presentation. It's from Sade Dada. You mentioned getting funding from African Union for the Kanu project. Was it a particular AU program? If so, which one?
There was an Axis project by the African Union Commission. They wanted to provide funding towards the establishment of IXPs across Africa, called Axis. And part of it is that they promoted 5 regional IXPs in West Africa, and IXPN, applied for that West Africa regional IXP, and we won the bid. So we got some funding to improve our infrastructure across Nigeria, and what I mentioned was part of that funds, were helpful towards establishing, a small power plant for the exchange point in Kano by providing solar panels and battery bank, so that we can run the exchange point there, because there were no Kano's. The location is a bit towards the extreme northern part of Nigeria, where they don't have data centers or co-location facility. So we had to set up one. And I'm just mentioning the part of the things that has really helped IXPN is the grant from the African Union for the West African IXP project.
Okay. The next question is from Brian Longwe. Brian Longwe says, is asking, the question goes to both Kenya and Nigeria, is asking, what are some of the factors that have led to the sustainability of the exchange point? I know that in Kenya, we insisted on a subscription model, which helped pay rent and salaries at the beginning. What, if any, current port fees or subscription levels? That's his question. So the question is about sustainability of the exchange.
Should I answer it, or someone is going to take it?
You can take it. You can take it, I think.
Okay. We have the same structure between IXPN and the Kenyan IXP. Both are not-for-profit organization and a membership-based organization. And we also charge the membership and the port charges. The prices for those are actually available on our websites. You can visit the website to see the what is it called, the port charges. And as I told you, we operate the same thing, and it's a subscription level that all the members contribute towards maintaining the exchange point by paying their port charges.
Okay. The next question is coming from Andrew Basket. He says, he's asking, what actions can we take to encourage more local hosting cloud companies through the region? Anyone, I think, can take this one.
I'll go. Certainly, I'm sure others have answers, but just based on the experience that I think you remember, Gina, in Rwanda, there is a cost element, of course, but a significant issue that we found was just simply awareness that of the costs that were being imposed on the ecosystem by hosting abroad on the ISPs. Was the significant cost of having to bring the content back, but for the hosting companies, the issue tended to be not really an understanding. Well, some websites didn't know that they were being hosted abroad because they gave their websites to a developer that put them all, bundled them up and put them abroad, so they didn't know and didn't really understand the latency link and the usage link of being abroad, slowing down the access to the content and what that was doing to usage. So as we say in the report, and if you go back to the Internet Society reports on Rwanda, a lot of it is, I think, awareness, really understanding what the implications are of hosting abroad. And then, of course, more work can be done to lower the cost, either through aggregation. In Rwanda, the then minister of ICT hosted a pilot project to bring some websites back into the country and see the impact. So there could be some subsidy or other benefit to start it off, as Muhammed described, also for the small help and get people started. But I think the first key is just awareness of the impact that it's having on both the hosting company and the ecosystem.
Anyone else on that question?
Yeah, I might add, obviously internet exchange points benefit local cloud companies very much because all of the user-based networks, the mobile networks and the ISPs should be on there, and it gives cloud companies, small startups, whatever, to go and be there and peer with the bigger operators. But I will add as well, even those cloud companies, they will need some international bandwidth. But certainly in order to get them started, we are very keen as a bigger operator to host and supply bandwidth services to cloud hosting companies in Africa, because it actually benefits us. So an advice to cloud hosting companies in the region is to go talk to the operators and help them understand the benefits of having you on their network, and why you should peer with them and why you should be on their network.
Okay. We have a question from Dean Piley. When will Google peer at the mentioned exchange point, Kenya, Nigeria? Is there a certain threshold that constitutes Google peering at an exchange? I think for the question, you're already peering at those exchange points, but probably the second part of the question, which is a threshold, can be more interesting for the audience.
Yes, we're currently at the 2 internet exchanges, although at the moment we have a facility down for Kenya, so we are restoring that facility, that transport. The threshold for peering would be probably 5 to 6 gigabit of traffic. We would want to test the waters and go and connect locally. So that would be part of our evaluation.
Okay, thank you.
So 5 or 6 for the entire ecosystem, not just one partner.
5 to 6 for the entire ecosystem.
In that market, yes.
Okay, I think it's important as well to mention that one of the things that will really help is the access network. So the more the access network within a certain ecosystem or a country is developed, the better the chances that the bigger CDNs will tend to come in that ecosystem, on that exchange. Okay,
that's right. So also when you're looking at the network effect, you want to have, when we're looking at IXPs, we want to have as many members as possible, because we can quantify the traffic that we would have by connecting directly. So IXPs play a very large role as a content, well, actually as a route aggregator, and that is what's attracting to a content player.
Correct. Okay. So the next question is from Tom Strixie. The question is, what is the panel opinion on the spread of traditional European exchange point into new regions? And he's mentioning AM6, DKIX, and links. The expansion of the traditional exchange point into new region. What is the panel thinking about that?
I can start.
Yes.
I think competition's good. Competition forces everyone to rethink their product set, to rethink their customer service, and make sure that they are very relevant to their members.
Anyone else?
Yeah, competition's very good. I think maybe when, you know, if a European internet exchange is thinking of coming to Africa, it should probably try and understand the needs and what problem it's trying to solve before making big jumps.
Okay.
I would just add, and others on this call can provide better perspective, but I think that it would be a shame if that lost some of the community building aspect, some of the technical capacity building aspect, if an IXP came in that was kind of ready to go immediately in the box and had, you know, was fully developed. I think one of the things that we saw in 2012 and in other countries that I've worked, that bringing the community together and training people that are going to AFBIF and other events to running the IXP is an important part of the ecosystem development. And I can't say that that's lost with these, but it would be a shame if it was.
Okay. The next question is coming from Amrish Foki. the question is, what advice would you give to new exchange points who are struggling to get operators on board? Some are afraid to lose transit customers. What model of cost sharing, operation and infrastructure would you also suggest? New exchange points struggling to get operators on board, and some are afraid to lose transit customers. What models of cost-sharing operations would you also suggest? Yeah.
Okay, let me attempt to understand this question. Can I,
yes,
I'm trying to understand, because he's talking about an IXP and he's talking about losing transit customers.
I think he means that the largest ISPs in the country will be afraid to lose their transit customers through the peering that would take place at the exchange. I don't think it's the IXP that would.
Correct.
That's what I'm trying to maybe get. Yes, but the reality is that what I keep telling our operators here is that the size of the internet keeps expanding. Even though we're localizing the traffic, more and more people are getting online. The percentage of population in Nigeria that are online some few years back, and now you can't even compare the difference. Two, the size of the internet is increasing. The quality of the content is increasing. If you look at it last few years, quality of video is an ordinary, CD quality, it went to DVD. Now high definition and 4K, more people will download. So I doubt if connection to the exchange point will contribute towards, dropping revenue for the major big transit providers in any country, because the size of the internet keeps increasing. Okay, so Michael, you can take it from here, please.
Yeah, I think one other learning and came out of some of the discussions was that if the IXP has a mandatory multilateral peering agreement, then you would be reluctant to join because you can't obviously peer with a transit customer. But I think also it's really to focus on the role of content as kind of the magnet for being able to pick up local content. Saves even the largest ISP in a country money versus having to go pick it up abroad. And as then you said, Muhammad correctly, grows the whole ecosystem, the whole pie, the whole business is growing. And that's what you're using to develop the internet in the country and to attract all the content, as we saw in both of the countries that we studied.
And okay. I would add to that you don't.
Sorry. Yes, Sylvie, go ahead.
I would add to that you don't need to have absolutely everyone at the IXP. You need to give freedom from the peers to apply the peering policy that they have with their own business model. So that's why the multilateral peering is a bit of a killer for IXPs. It's not something that is advisable. Once you give your membership the freedom to peer with who they want, how they want, then you create value for everyone. But it's okay not to have everybody peer with everyone, and it's okay if some are not joining the IXPs because they fear of losing transit customers.
Okay.
I can add as well. I mean,
yes,
support exactly what Sylvie and Michael have just said around the peering policies. Enforce, IXP is trying to impose peering policies, allowing freedom for operators. But back to the original question, as I said in my earlier presentation, was we peered first in a country like Zimbabwe. When we first arrived in Zimbabwe with fiber, and we put a backbone in, we used to run some satellite links for some customers, and we'd peer with the others. And when we came with fiber backbone and we started to really connect up people, the people we previously peered with, we already knew them and had a relationship with and became our customers. So for us, it has been the opposite experience to what the question was asking. By peering with people, we've found that has encouraged a future business relationship.
And thank you, Robert. For the interest of time, yes, Michuki, you can go ahead and probably share that question. I don't see it.
Okay, so maybe, yes, so one more question maybe, and then we can sort of start winding down. So I see the final question I would sort of like to pose, because Ben had already indicated he'd like to answer it live, is question from Brett Lewan, which is, it's great to see all the growth in Kenya and Nigeria. And the question is, what is the major difference between the exchanges and how they've evolved over the past decade, specifically from a geopolitical infrastructure investment, pricing, regulation, etc. Becoming more regional hubs where they're supposed to serving domestic, but also inter-country networks and ASNs. So Ben, maybe you can go first, and then Michael.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, look, I think what I'm going to say about this is that the ones that are emerging as regional hubs, it's entirely about geopolitical and infrastructure questions, less about the nuances of pricing at those inter-exchange points. Regulation will prevent it from happening, but the ones that have emerged as regional, regional hubs, South Africa, Cape Town, Johannesburg, Durban, slightly behind that, Nairobi, and Lagos. These primarily are having a decent regulatory environment to allow this to happen, but just big markets. It is the South African market for ICT spend is far bigger than any of the other countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Kenya is bigger than other markets in Eastern Africa. Ethiopia has got potential, but it's to the north, but it has had those regulatory boundaries that have stopped it happening. And Nigeria, just volume of people. The economies the economy in Nigeria is growing so fast, and the volume of people is so massive. So really, it is it's entirely what makes an exchange grow and become popular is that market and population and trade that's happening on there. And what will stop it happening is the regulation. Unpleasant regulation will stop it happening, but as long as the regulation is free enough to allow it, the growth is going to happen in those that have got the most conducive business environments.
Michael?
Yes, I'm not clear from the second sentence. What do you see as the major differences between these exchanges? I don't know if that's between Kenya and Nigeria. Ben definitely answered the question, the difference between these and others potentially. I think there's much more similarities between the two countries than differences. I mean, they've evolved quite similarly. Nigeria is obviously a much larger country in terms of population, and so now has more traffic. So I think that explains the differences in some of the numbers that we saw. And as Ben said, I think the regulation makes a big difference, the cross-border regulations, not requiring ISPs from neighboring countries to have a license to pick up traffic makes a difference. They should only need a license if they want to sell like any other operator in the country, but not just to exchange at the IXP. Some of it, of course, is just timing. If you look in Europe, on a map, you would never predict that an IXP in the Netherlands, which is not nearly one of the largest countries in the region, would be one of the biggest. So some of it is just good governance, being in the right place, starting off well, and as Ben said, good solid regulations that allow it to grow. In the case of Europe, of course, creating moving towards a single market help the smaller countries, IXPs, benefit from the whole region. And that could be something that I think would help the regions enormously, but that's a bigger geopolitical question.
All right. I don't know whether the other panelists have something to add, but as we go into the closing comments, so I'll do two things at the same time because we've run out of time. So first, I have a question which I want us to sort of take as a takeaway from this discussion, as an ongoing discussion, is what is the new vision we should be having for Africa? So we have the 80-20 by 2020. This is 2020. We've seen some networks that are up to 80%, 70% for some. What is the new vision we should be aspiring for looking forward? So I'll ask the panelists to sort of give a comment on that as we wind up in their closing remarks. And as that happens, I would like to ask my colleagues to unveil and share a copy of the report to all the attendees in the chat room so that they could get to see this. And then we'll come back for closing remarks. So maybe I will start with you, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks again for this, for a fascinating discussion and pushing us to think forward. Maybe I'll be in 8 years from now presenting the next version of this, although I think that the changes again will be unimaginable in those 8 years. But I think that the initial vision was solid. I think that we should be pushing towards more measurements so that we can really start to accurately determine this, but I think that the vision was solid for maximizing the amount of traffic in the region, in the countries, as soon as possible.
Thank you, Michael. Muhammed?
Hello? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. The next vision you said, sorry, I was busy talking to someone. For me, it's let's see how we can improve capacity building in Nigeria. A lot of what I notice, Nigerians that are technically savvy are actually moving out of the country. I think we should find a way to collaborate with ISOC to build more capacity across Africa to get more people to know about network operations so that we can have competent hands.
Thank you, Muhammed. Sylvie?
So I think we need a stronger infrastructure. We need more data centers, more intra-network in the data centers. We need more internet exchanges. We need more content platforms, more cloud operators. We need more of everything. There is, in 15 years, Africa will be 20% of the world population. Now's the time to really make a big bet and make sure that we are scaling up to serve the needs of the users. So you have more DCs, more IXPs. There's a lot more to do than what we're currently doing.
Thank you, Sylvie. Ben?
Yeah, so look, we at Liquid Telecom, I hope we are rising to the challenge and doing that and building more of those things. I mean, but for me, my focus has moved on to a bit more what's next, and I'm starting to think about having built fiber and DCs and enable cloud operators and CDNs to come to Africa. What is the digital innovation and digital economy innovation and digital jobs and digital workforce that is going to come about? We are trying to work out how to get people to have the skills to start building applications on cloud that is now in Africa. We are working out how to get people to create their own entertainment platforms, video gaming, music, etc., on the YouTube caches and things that have come to Africa. So really it is around helping people with the capacities and skills to use some of these digital platforms. It's no longer just about Africa being a consumption market, consumer of cat videos. Africa needs to be making its own cat videos and more meaningful stuff than that as well. So that is really what's going to grow it, is the level of creation and co-creation in the innovation space and entertainment and all sorts of things that's going to come about. That's what's going to make us have the demand to keep on building the stuff that Sylvie was asking us to build more of.
Thank you very much, and a big round of applause to our excellent panelists. Thank you very much. And now, as we go into the closing session, so I would like to welcome you to the exclusive access of the report. As you may have seen in the chat room, you get to see it fast. It will be officially launched tomorrow, but as our community and key supporters, you get to see it today. And so look forward to the official announcements tomorrow and share it widely with your communities. And I would like to also take this opportunity to thank everyone who participated in this study, starting with Michael Kende for really agreeing to do the study again, and also for all those who are interviewed both in Kenya and Nigeria and beyond, all our partners, the experts who gave us the feedback on this report, and our partners on this, Facebook and others, and also the team at ISOC just for helping putting this together, from our comms team and so on. I really like to say thank you very much. And before I end, I want to also mention that we are starting on the review of the 80-20 by 2020. So this is something that we want to measure. How do we look, not just beyond Kenya and Nigeria? We are going to look at 6 other countries across the continent. And we're going to start this, and hopefully we'll be able to share the report with you later in August or September of this year. And we shall have more insights and points to highlight based on where those countries are. So please look out for that. And with that, I would like to say thank you very much to everyone for attending, and look forward to continuously engage with you online. Do stay safe and take care, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.